How about a food source you can grow in your vegetable garden that you can preserve up to 3 years without any refrigeration? Green beans. We love growing beans in our garden because it's such an important food source. Now let's talk about the two different types of beans. We have bush beans and we got pole beans. Now bush beans are just what they sound like. They're closer to the ground there and you have to bend over to pick them. And we normally get 3 to 5 pickings or harvesting off of bush beans. And then we have pole beans. Pole beans need to be trellised. Most of the time we get a little longer harvest out of pole beans than we do bush beans, but the main thing is you can grow a lot more in a smaller area. And the best thing is we don't have to bend over to pick them. We can pick them, harvest them standing up, and that's important for an old man like me. Pole beans take up less room because they're vertical. So we're growing up and we're saving room, especially for you guys out there that's got smaller gardens. Pole beans could work into your strategy for growing beans really good because you can grow them on a trellis or grow them vertically. Bush beans take a little bit more room there. Normally speaking, beans do not like hot weather. You want to grow them early in the spring or you want to grow them in the fall. They're more productive in those slots than they are in the middle of the summertime. Now here we are in the middle of June and we've had some heat in the last few days, up around 100 degrees. And I want to show you how some of our beans are doing in this heat. But normally speaking, you're going to be a lot more productive growing them in the spring slot and in the fall slot. What's going to happen a lot of times in the heat, especially if you don't have them on drip irrigation, is they will stress a little bit and they will throw their blooms. We see that all the time. People complaining about they don't have any beans, they just got vines. Well, the heat will cause them, especially pole beans, to throw what we call throw the blooms off. When they start stressing in that heat, it's the defense mechanism of that plant and it throws those blooms off just to keep the plant alive. So we see that a lot in the heat. Well, what we have here is Topazio bean, or some people in different regions call this cranberry bean, or they call it October bean. Look how pretty those pods are. They have that reddish pink and mottled on them. Now these are grown a lot up in the mountains, North Georgia and Tennessee and Kentucky. And most of the time it's eaten as a shelling bean. So we'll shell these out. Let me see if I can get one busted open for you right here. Look how easy they shell out. Now we'll take these things and dry them and use them as dried beans, or you can shell them and use them as a fresh bean there. Pretty good sized bean. Now these right here are coming off in the middle of June, end of June. It's been really hot, but we had them on drip irrigation, so we made a decent crop. A lot of times people like to have these come off around October, hence October beans. They seem to do really good growing in the fall. Now this variety right here is about 65 to 70 days to maturity. So if we plant them here in zone 8 between the 1st and 15th of August, we're going to be harvesting these beans in the month of October, which is perfect timing for us. It's a great food source, it's a good bean, and it's a pretty bean. Well, what we have here is pole beans. Now, this right here is butter beans, or some of you may call lima beans. Here in the South, we call them butter beans. You can grow these as a bush bean or a pole bean. A lot of times the guys that grow the bush beans will let them get filled up, pull them, and put them in a tree and pick them off there one and done. Picking bush butter beans is one of the toughest jobs in the garden, I can promise you that. And that's the reason I particularly love to grow the pole butter beans or lima beans. As you can see, let's see if we can find some in here. Right here's one. They put on and you can stand up and harvest them, plus they last a lot longer. These I planted in the springtime, and we may get a decent crop off of them this summer if I keep them watered well. But this fall, these things are going to load up and we're going to be harvesting butter beans, several pickings of them all the way to frost. So they have a lot to give back. You can see they loaded up with blooms right there, and they just have a long harvest window, which is what I like about them. Now the downside is you do have to trellis them, so you got to have some kind of system there. What I used here was steel metal fence post and Hortinova net. Now here's kind of a specialty bean that I like to grow every now and then. And it is a soybean, but it is a particular type of soybean called edamame. And if you look right here, these things are loaded up. Now the way we like to prepare them is we like to pick them green when they're filled out well, and we'll put them in a pot and we'll boil the pod and all in some salty water. After they become tender, then we put them out and we run some cold water over them, and then you shell them out and eat them. Makes a great healthy snack. Let's talk about Pest on Beans. Armyworms. A lot of people can have trouble with the armyworms. Now we normally don't have much of an issue here, but they can be devastating on beans. So you want to keep an eye out for armyworms, and at the first sign you want to get a treatment on them. BT works decent as a preventative, but if you're having armyworm problems, you probably want to step it up to a product like Bug Buster 2. Next is aphids. Now aphids is probably the easiest to control on beans. The key is getting good spray coverage. Most of our products will control aphids. You just got to get it on them. So you want to spray on the stems, underneath those leaves, just get good coverage. Horticulture oil, pyrethrin, neem oil, Bug Buster 2, any of those will control aphids. Probably the most troublesome insect or pest that we have on green beans, if you can see right here, can we zoom in there? See those little black spots there? These beans right here are considered stung, and they're stung by an insect or weevil called the cowpea cucurio. Now that cowpea cucurio is going to sting that pod, and you're going to see this little black spot on your bean there. And when it stings that pod, it's laying an egg inside of that bean pod there, and they're going to be little white grubs growing in there. Now I don't know about you, but I'm not particularly fond of eating grubs. So we keep them picked out there, and we don't eat any that's been stung up. We discard those. In the springtime, the cowpea cucurio seems to be worse on our beans and peas. One of the weird things is the fall crops normally don't have as much pressure. So we like to plant a lot of our peas and beans into the fall so we don't have to deal with Mr. Cowpea cucurio as much. Now, to keep those cowpea cucurios controlled, you need to stay under a tight spray schedule 3 to 5 days apart with Bug Buster 2. You want to spray over the top and get really good coverage, and that will control the cowpea cucurio. And again, growing it in the fall, you won't have as much pressure. Now the two leaf diseases we deal with the most is rust and powdery mildew on our beans. High humidity, hot weather is problematic for these beans getting those leaf diseases. Fungamax, which is a fungicide that we sell, is an ideal product to spray on your beans to control those two different problems. You can mix Fungamax in with your Bug Buster 2, so you're spraying a fungicide and insecticide at the same time. It works really good as a preventative and as a curative to keep those leaves nice and clean and free of any diseases. Let's talk about fertility on beans. Now, beans are legumes or nitrogen fixers, and they don't take a lot of fertilizer. If you give beans too much fertilizer, you're going to end up with a lot of vine and no beans, and that's not what we're after. When I plant my beans, I will incorporate complete organic fertilizer, which is a great choice at planting, and that's pretty much all I fertilize them. From there on, they're fine. Another thing, beans like sandy type soils. They don't really like heavy clay soils. So beans require very little fertilization, and they will grow well in marginal type soils. So if you're not growing beans, incorporate growing beans in your garden. It's going to be a great food source for you and your family. Whether you eat them green, whether you preserve them, whether you do dried beans, it doesn't matter. Beans should be grown in your garden. And it works perfect for growing in the fall when you don't have as much competition in your garden. Beans are going to be the perfect crop to come off around October.